Cole, thank you for joining the podcast. So Cole's an academic and author and a football coaching expert. He's currently an academic lecturer and lead coach for Chester FC. He's a coach developer for the Football Association, and he's also the author for the book The Intelligent Soccer Coach. So my first question, Carl, is how did you get into coaching? How did it come about?
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on, first of all, Christie. Good to be here, mate. So quite a normal route in terms of what a lot of people go through is parenting. So I wasn't really involved in any coaching at a young age. I just played for a little bit in my school days and whatnot. Obviously had a family, lad got involved in it, 6-7 years of age, went down to local grassroots club. He joined a club there, then literally within a month or two they were looking for volunteers to help out. So I just thought I'd give it a go and see how it went. So I just did that for about a year or two, and then after a while I just started to really enjoy it and just wanted to see where it went. So I just went on a couple of courses with the Football Association, got a few qualifications, and it just sort of grew from there in terms of where I am today. So
did it kind of start as a hobby then?
Absolutely, yeah. So my background, I worked actually in double glazing for about 13 years. So nothing to do with education or football or anything. So yeah, just basically just helping out, because like I say, my lad wanted to play. It's one of those situations where if no one put themselves forward, then there's a chance that the team couldn't actually carry on. So it was one of them I sort of not forced into it. I was happy to do it, but yeah, it was just something I just thought going out basically just to help my son out more than anything. So
was there a moment where you thought, I can see this as a career?
Yeah, I think straight away near enough in terms of enjoyment and working with kids, working in football in terms of just obviously most people go into it because they love the game, obviously. So to go and do a little bit, and yeah, it's the satisfaction you get from the kids enjoying your sessions and enjoying being there on a game day and so forth. I would say it was probably a couple of years though before I started thinking I'm all right at it. I seem to be doing okay, and I was going on a couple of courses and I could understand them, and I could see where I'd progressed from where I'd first started a year or two ago. And it was just that same time I was just not enjoying me work. I was just really not enjoying going into work, long hours and so forth, and I was just thinking probably a little bit more to life than this. So I started doing little bits of coaching, paid coaching work alongside it, and then eventually I could see that if I really wanted to go for it, I had to take the jump. So I left my job, went back into education, went to university around about 28, 29 years of age, went and got a degree in sports coaching, did some other work alongside it, working nights and so forth. Carried on doing bits of coaching, paid work alongside of it, just to keep me obviously foot in the door in terms of coaching. And then after my degree, I went and did a PGCE. I was lucky enough to go to a college where I did my PGCE, did that for a year, and then they were happy with what I was doing and offered me a full-time job afterwards. So the first real step then, full-time employment in education, working at a college, and again just doing loads of coaching alongside of it.
Do you feel the experiences you had before football, was there transferable skills into coaching? Did you feel you learned a lot previously, or did you think did coaching come naturally to you? Were you good with people or instruction?
Yeah, I think it's I have this conversation with a lot of coaches and so forth. I think I bring a different skill set to me coaching compared to other coaches maybe, and they have different skills that I don't have. So a lot of coaches that I know played the game at a reasonable level and so forth, which I never did. Again, if you go and see some of my demonstrations, you'll see that. So they have really good in-depth knowledge about the game in terms of technique and tactics and so forth. Whereas I'm probably behind in terms of that just because of my background. But what I did bring to the table in terms of my previous employment and in terms of family life and whatnot, is just I think I'm extremely well organised. My planning skills are really good. I like to think in terms of the detail that goes into them and the precision that goes into them. And then just things like communication skills, because I used to, in terms of my old job, I had to get up and do presentations and so forth in terms of people and directors and large groups of people. So I had all that. And that's what I brought with me, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. I talk a little bit about that in the book in terms of recognising what you already have as a person, and then recognising how you can use that within your coaching environment, because I think it's key in terms of always, it's a bit like we say with players, players need to know what they're good at. We're sometimes concentrating too much on what they need to get better at. But we should also think about what is the strength, or we say super strength, and it's the same with coaches. Identify what you're good at and really work on that, and use that and turn it into like I say, a super strength, and then that becomes a real advantage. So yeah, 100% definitely transferable skills from all parts of my life.
You've come in from a different industry, volunteering, and then educating yourself. Talk to me about the process in terms of your coaching journey.
Yeah, so started doing little bits of paid work alongside it. So I was looking just at the same time the girls program was starting to really take off in this country. So they were opening centre of excellences, or what they're now known as RTCs. So they were just opening up, and there was one in Crewe. They were opening up. So I went down, had an interview for that, and was lucky enough to get a position with them. So again, that was a lot of commitment. Twice a week in the evenings. That's travelling down to Crewe from where I was about a 40-minute drive. Then again, games at the weekend, and we should travel up to Cumbria, down to Birmingham and so forth. And that was also alongside my normal job at the time. I was still in full-time employment, plus my family and obviously and so forth. So lots of commitment there in terms of extra hours, but that was a really good learning curve for me in terms of really having to deliver in a professional club environment. It's obviously you can get away with a little bit of stuff in grassroots, if we're honest, in terms of people's expectations are a lot lower. So managed to do that, and then alongside that as well, I started working for Manchester United, just in terms of their soccer schools. So again, just some summer work or Easter work, just going on and doing some programs for them. So all that was happening. Alongside that, I was doing me FA work. So I was doing, not my FA work, so my FA qualifications. So going through the badge qualifications like everyone else does, and doing some extra CPD stuff as well. So I was getting myself there, and eventually I just started moving and sort of going between different positions at clubs and building myself up. So I moved away from Crewe and went into Wigan Athletics Academy. I got a job there for 2 years. That was within the boys' academy. It was just a slightly step up. And then that's when, around about that time, I got my teaching role as well. So I was doing that alongside it. But I missed the girls' game, to be honest. I really enjoyed doing that. So I left Wigan after 2 years and went and worked at Stoke City in their girls' programme. A couple of years there. And then eventually got a job here at the university. Obviously, we're based in Manchester, so again, the travel, Manchester Stoke was really difficult. But I was lucky, a job came up at Manchester City within their girls' programme. So managed to went for the interview, lucky enough to get it, and spent 5 years at Man City within their girls' programme, which was really good. And then alongside that, started doing some work with the FA, just looking at the mentoring side. I was an FA mentor for a couple of years, and then also worked as what's now known as a coach developer, so deliver on their coaching qualifications.
Again, just touching on what you said then, so I get the impression your journey is quite linear. So you mentioned the experiences beforehand and kind of growing with your coaching journey. You mentioned risk, you touched on risk then.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you, just reflecting back on that time, that there was obstacles or kind of things that you did during that period that was risk reward, or could have done something better, or along those lines?
I think the main thing was risk. It was just the risk situation. I got a family, got a mortgage and so forth. Like I say, I was leaving a highly paid job to go into another job that was at the time supporting me just to get through university. And I think the biggest risk at the end of it, I could do 3 years of my degree, another year in terms of my teacher qualification. At the end of it, I could have been unemployed, and it was a massive risk. And I think that's when you've got that much on the line now, I think that does make you really work even harder. I'm sure, again, everyone out there works extremely hard, but I think sometimes you just need something to give you that extra push, and that realism that it's coming up to this 4 years now where I've finished the journey of my education. I've actually got to get something out of it. So I remember I was applying for other jobs at the time when it was coming close to the end of my teacher education, and I was just getting told no, or I wasn't even getting an interview for it because lack of experience. Probably looked at my age, probably wondering why I've not taught before at that age and so forth. And you're starting to think like, have I made a mistake here? But like I said, I was just so lucky that again I just made sure wherever I went, and I say this to my students and so forth, you just look at life as a constant job interview. So I was lucky, I think, when I was at the college and was doing my teacher ed, I just looked and thought this could even be a job interview here, like a 9-month job interview. And I was just lucky at the end of it, 2 positions came up, and it was actually myself and another person who's going through the same sort of process as me. We both got the jobs because basically they saw what we could do, and they didn't see it as a risk then, because we had to obviously do a bit of teaching in terms of the education. So I was extremely lucky on that. But I've got to say, might come across a bit big, I've been extremely lucky. I think near enough every time I've applied for something or gone for something, I've been lucky enough to get it. So I can honestly say at the moment there's not probably a situation where I've gone, oh, I wish I'd have gone and done that. I think everything's sort of gone the way I've wanted. And I'm sort of at the situation now in my life where I'm just sort of happy. I'm probably not looking elsewhere or trying to do anything else. I've got to where I've wanted to get. I'm not complacent in the slightest, but I'm just enjoying what I'm doing now. And I think, again, you're an extremely lucky person if you're in that position to sit there and think, you know, I'm happy with what I've got here. And not to say I may not go off. I mean, the Chester role that I'm at the moment, which I'll speak about in a second, that's something that I've decided I just want to have a go at. But yeah, I'm just in a good position. So yeah.
Do you think doubt and fear actually can be a motivational drive?
Oh, 100%. Like I say, yeah. I think that fear, that for me, the biggest thing about me is failure. I hate failing at anything. I hate admitting that I've failed anything. I find it embarrassing and so forth if anything comes across that way that I've not succeeded. So that was the big drive for me, and it's a massive drive for me in terms of I've chosen this now. Once you took that first step and that leap, then I've just thought I cannot not fail. I just can't fail. I've just got to succeed, and it's a massive drive to go and do what you need to do, 100%.
Describe maybe the qualities of a good coach. So you've had experiences working with a range of different people up and down the country, up and down in terms of elite level to grassroots level. How would you define what a good coach is?
I think it's a great question, but it's also a really difficult question. So just as I mentioned before, I'm at Chester now. I left Man City last season to go and do a new role at Chester, and one of the reasons I wanted to go and do that is because I'd be the lead coach for the junior section, so I wanted to try and put me stamp down on somewhere and do things the way I wanted to do things. So part of that it was enrolment in terms of getting new coaches on board, and we're in a position where the club at the moment, they can't pay for these coaches, so it's just got to be voluntary, so I had to be mindful of that. But a big thing for me when we put the advert out and I was interviewing coaches to come on board was the first thing we need is just good people. Again, let's just take the coach bit out of the equation here. I just need good people on board. I need people I can trust and who are reliable. I've got people who just get on well with the kids and get on well with other coaches. I need to have coaches who can communicate well. I need all of that. I just need, that was the big thing, I just need good people. Because I think you can help once they're in. If you get good people on board, you can help them with the coaching, and you can develop the coaching and improve them as coaches. If you get quite good coaches in, but we're not good people and we're not able or prepared to listen and get feedback, or if they're unreliable and so forth, you sort of against a losing battle there in terms of you're not going to be able to help them. So the first place I always start with is what type of person are they, and I think that's massive for it. But then on top of that, obviously we need to coach, don't we? I think it is important. So then I look at, we'll probably talk about it a little bit later. I look at people like Jack Trainer. I've got huge amounts of time for. Rob Carlisle's just come in recently into the organisation. I go and watch and listen to Rob a lot of the time. And the reason being, I've touched on it before, my football background's not that great in terms of playing and so forth. So the detail that they go into, and in terms of the way they speak to players and the way they support and help players around whatever it is the topic is or what they need to improve on, the detail that they go into and the knowledge around it, I think is fantastic. And I'm still learning that, and I'm still getting better at that. So I think once you've got those good people, it's then coaching wise how they actually go and support players, how their actual knowledge around the game is massive for me as well in terms of it. I think it's something that's gone out of the game a lot in terms of, I think there's a lot of, we talk about player-centred stuff and I talk about it in my book and it's absolutely key, but I think sometimes we go too far with it in terms of we just keep asking the players what do they think they should do, and at the end of the day, at some stage we actually do have to tell them. I always talk about school teachers and coaches are very, very similar. And you would never go in a maths lesson and you just keep asking the pupils how would they do the math solution and what did they do wrong in terms of the math solution, because eventually you're going to have to help them. You can't just expect them to try and work it out constantly. At some stage they do just need to be told this is how this equation works, or this is how multiplication works, or whatever it is. I think we're the same as coaches. At some point you do actually have to go in and give them the information, and I think it's been shifted away a little bit in terms of coaching over the last few years. So that's something why I'd like to go and watch, especially like Jack. I'll go watch Jack all day long in terms of just seeing that detail and just one or two little snippets of information. You're just thinking, I wouldn't have even thought of that. That's not something I would have said, and I'm like jotting it down and so forth. So good people, good knowledge around the game, I think is absolutely key. So
you mentioned you didn't have a previous playing career. Do you think that's impactful in terms of being a good coach?
Just because I didn't have it doesn't mean I can't get it. So I've just gone out and got that information. So I'll go watch coaches who've got it. I'll go and watch a game. So we talk about watching the game. It's not watching the game because we like enjoy watching football. It's watching the game. It's not following the ball and so forth. It's what's happening at the other end of the pitch when the ball's at that end of the pitch in terms of what are units and individual players and so forth are doing, and how did they manage to actually achieve that little bit of success there. What was the tiny details they did beforehand, before maybe they even got the ball and so forth. So go and watch it and look what's actually happening and so forth. So look at the individual players and look at the tactics of the game and so forth. So I had to go and do all that. So I wouldn't say it was a problem. I was just on that part of coaching, I was probably behind to other coaches. But as I mentioned before, those transferable skills, I was in other parts of coaching, I was probably a little bit ahead than other coaches. So it all balances itself out. But if you've got it, it's definitely a help. It's definitely a help, isn't it? But that doesn't mean you just because you've played at a high level or you were good at a high level doesn't mean you're going to be a good coach. Because we talked before about those people skills. If you haven't got those people skills, then you're not going to be a good coach.
Football's glamorised, and we see the nature of football coaches and football clubs as kind of this glamorous place to work, and everything's perfect and everything's happy. Is there any myths about coaching that you've found out over your journey where you thought, actually, I didn't realise it was like that?
I saw someone on Twitter the other day, and I thought it was brilliant, and I've put it in. I'm just producing a coach's handbook at the moment in terms for the coaches for next year. On one of the slides, I've nicked this little phrase off Twitter the other day, and it says, "Everyone wants to coach until it's time to do what coaches do." And it just seems so easy coaching again, because football's a very opinionated game, and especially the way it is this day and age in terms of the amount of access there is to it in terms of watching it on telly. We have also like your Monday Night Football and so forth, and we've got Neville and Carragher talking about it. Everyone thinks they can do the same in terms of, yeah, I know about a press and we'll do this, and yeah, I'd get my team to press and I'd get my team to do this, and I want my players to do this. But then actually going out and coaching it and teaching it on the pitch, it's just a completely different story, and it's extremely difficult. And again, it goes down to understanding players and working with players and understanding them as an individual. So I think the first thing is it's not easy at all. And the amount of time you actually spend on the pitch compared to everything else that you have to do, percentage is really quite minimal. For every hour you spend on the pitch training, you've probably done 2-3 hours prep time or review time afterwards. So it's not glamorous out on the pitch constantly and working with players and getting the ball out of there. So, and the other, obviously, it's just extremely hard work. It's not something that you can just do as a job in terms of go home at the end of the day and switch off. And you speak to most people involved in football in terms of coaches or managers, we talk about 24/7. It is 24/7. You're constantly thinking about it. You're constantly on the phone, whether it's parents or players or coaching staff, whoever it may be. You're taking messages. You'll see on Twitter again, people on holiday, but they're constantly on the phone because they're trying to organise stuff or whatever it may be. It is extremely hard work, and you just can't switch off from it. It becomes part of your life, and it's not a job. It's basically your life, and you have to fit other things around it because it just comes first, and it just takes over. It's an absolute beast, but at the same time, it's really, obviously, it's just so enjoyable if you can get yourself within that environment. I think the other thing is that what I've learned in terms of these, whenever you go to these bigger clubs, and obviously I've mentioned some of them, and I won't go into specifics, but I always find is there's always something, or there's always problems at every single club you go to, and it's just different problems. So just because a club's got loads of money and loads of resources and so forth, there'll be something else because of that then has a bigger impact around something other part of coaching. And you're just thinking, I'm going to go into this environment and it'll be easy, I can just go in and do it, and it's not. There's always some sort of conflict, or there's always some sort of problem in terms of preventing you from just doing what you want to do and go out on the pitch. So you've got to be really adaptable in terms of personality. You've got to be really adaptable in terms of thinking about how you're going to go and deliver your session, in terms of you think you've got this. So for example, like every grassroots coach will moan about in terms of they're expecting 10 players and 8 will turn up, which again, I absolutely understand, but it's the same with professional clubs. You'll expect 12 players, and the next minute you've either got another 2 from another age group, or they want to go and take your strikers to go and work off over there, or the goalkeepers are off with a goalkeeper coach. So it's the same sort of problems, but just in a different way. So it's really quite challenging, but again, that's just part of coaching. So.
Did you ever feel burnt out at all during the process? And on that, did you ever seek support? Did you have a mentor, a well-known mentor that kind of supported you throughout your journey, just to help with that psychological needs? And the reason I say that, Carl, is we've spoke to people about players and the pressures on football players, but at the same time, the coaches are kind of in that environment as well. So I'm just trying to get you to think about just the process of, if it's consistent, and if it's constant, does that impact you as an individual, and is there coping mechanisms for that or not?
I think first of all, in terms of burnout, I think it can be sometimes a little bit, you just need a break. So at Chester at the moment, this is actually, on Sunday, we finish on Sunday, we're having our 6-week break over the summer holidays. We were talking about it last night with the coaches, and I was saying, I'm off for a week, when I got another week and I'm off on holiday and getting away. But I said, once that's out of the way, so that's 2 weeks off, I'll be ready to go again. So I've got 4 weeks where I'm going out looking for players. I've got to go and organise fixtures, got to get a training schedule in place. So I'm back on it after 2 weeks. But that 2 weeks will be enough, and I'll be happy. But you do need those 2 weeks. And even then, like I mentioned before, you still be doing stuff, but it's not the constant 24/7 hours sort of type of thing. So definitely need those sort of 2 weeks, just to get that done. In terms of coping mechanisms, I'd probably say, I'm not at the high elite of the game in terms of the pressures that they come under. However, I am under some pressure at some stage throughout the year or throughout the weeks, in terms of just because of the different roles I've got on. Sometimes it's that juggling, and I've probably, just because of where my age and where I've come from, I've probably not really use any sort of coping mechanism, if that makes sense. Because when I first started the journey, and probably because of my background from where I came from, because I can tell you double glazing's high pressure. The pressure you come under from there is immense compared to what I've come under in terms of my coaching. And again, we never had anything there. It was just sort of get on with it type of thing. So I think just because of that background and my age and so forth, it's not something I've really had. In terms of those coping mechanisms, I'm just extremely lucky in terms of the people I've got around me who are close to me, who just sort of put up with me, if that makes sense. And that's, when you look back at it over the last couple of years, when obviously more's coming out about mental health and support and so forth, you realise that they shouldn't have to do that. But they are good, and you understand it and so forth. In terms of mentors, I'd say I'm extremely lucky. I wouldn't say I've had one single person that I keep going back to, but I'd just say the environments I've worked in and the places I've been just surrounded by really good people and really good coaches, and I can just go to them. So, for example, here at university, I've mentioned Rob and Jack, but people like Neil Scott's here, who's got vast amounts of experience. Work, especially in the foundation phase, the work he does with the smaller kids is fantastic. So again, I can bounce stuff off of him. We've got Mike Walsh, again, his experience with the FA. Go back to Jack, his FA education history. So I've gone to loads to him when I'm doing my FA roles to get help and support. But then in my previous roles as well, I keep the people who I've worked with, I keep in touch with. So like I say, I was at Man City for 5 years. There's 2 or 3 coaches there I'll constantly speak to. And we just, again, bounce, not just ideas off of each other, but it's nice to bounce frustrations off each other as well, in terms of, it's not, sometimes it's just good to hear somebody else who's probably got a bit of a challenge on, because then you're thinking, yeah, it's just normal. And it's not, it's not just me that's feeling the pressure or having the frustrations and so forth. So it's nice to speak to them as well. It just goes back to that good people type of thing. I'm just lucky to have good people around me, and that's nothing to do with me. That's just where I've been and the people I've worked with. So I've been extremely lucky there.
You mentioned some of the mentors that you've had. What makes a good mentor then? What qualities do they have? You mentioned kind of the coaches at City, a community of practice where you might share ideas, but also emotionally share ideas as well. What makes a good mentor within the modern game?
I think, first of all, massively listening skills, just to be able to sit, because like again, if you want to have a bit of a rant or a bit of a, sometimes you just blurt stuff out and they can just sit there and listen. And that might be enough sometimes. That'd be go, oh, I feel better now, and go away and do it. The biggest one for me that I found, and it's something I've brought in at Chester in terms of coaches and whatnot, I think you need to be challenged, and I think you don't want people just agreeing with you all the time. So when we've gone into Chester, so with all the age groups, we've not got a head coach with any of the age groups. So we have 2 or 3 coaches with each age group. No one's in charge. They've all got the same amount of input. Because I think if you have that head coach type of thing, they sort of make the final decision, and then they're sort of maybe not take on board other information. So it goes back to that mentoring thing. They need to come back and challenge you, and not necessarily just for the sake of challenging you, but just go, when you've decided that, or when you've put that into place, have you considered this? Have you thought about that? What is the reason that you've done that? And I think it then helps you then think back around the process in terms of whether it's a session plan or whether it's an intervention with a player or whether it's a decision in a game or so forth, to make sure you thought what your thought process was behind it, and then was that the right reason to actually go ahead and do it. I think that's massive in terms of coaching. If we talk about coaching philosophies and having values and having beliefs, and it's how many coaches actually say, I've got these values and I've got these beliefs, but then actually go ahead and demonstrate them on a constant basis throughout training and throughout games. And are we actually making these decisions based upon their needs or maybe the players' needs? And so if we go back to that player-centred stuff, in terms of who you're actually making a decision for here, is it really for the players or is it really for yourself? So I think that mentor, if they can listen, obviously, get that information off you and find out what it is you actually need support and help with, and then just come back with a little challenge or a little question that makes you think about that. And I think that's really helpful. That's what I found, especially when I went to Man City. I worked alongside probably 2 coaches, and we would spend, I would say, at least 10-15. We would set our sessions up, and then we'd spend 10-15 minutes walking through the practices before the players got there. And it was just simple things like, is that the right size in terms of the area? I'm going to ask them to do this after they've done this. Is that the right task for the players afterwards? And they come back, well, would they do that in the game, or is that distance similar to what they would have to do in a game, or do you think that's going to be too easy for them? I needed that off those other coaches, and I was thinking, yeah, do you know what? And sometimes it was, you know what? Yeah, no, I'm right. I think I'm right. I don't want to say I'm right. I think that's right. Or it might be, do you know what? Yeah, you got a really good point there. And I think so. It's not necessarily just being a mentor in terms of I just ringing someone up and going, I need a bit of help or so forth. I think it's that constant the support there all the time, where any time you just go and speak to them and so forth. I don't think the best mentors don't have a title as a mentor. They're just someone you work with or speak with regularly and get help with. So I think that's really key.
So in terms of your experience, how does that lead to your role at Chester? So talk to me about Chester and your position there and what you do around the football club.
Yeah, so like I said, I look after the junior section. So all the young players and teams up to the age of under 14s. So with it being a semi-professional club at the moment, my role's got lots of parts to it, which is fine. Actually, I really enjoy doing it. So just like basic stuff in terms of organising games, referees and all that type of stuff. But my main job is player development and coach development. And the top of that is coach development, because if we can help the coaches and get them to improve and do things differently, then it'll just have that knock-on effect to players. So it's that domino effect, isn't it? So my main role there is supporting the coaches, because like I say, the majority of them, their backgrounds, none of them have really got background in terms of maybe working in a professional club. I think there's one coach there at the moment who does. So they're either there because they want to just come and want to work in a nice environment in terms of coaching. They want to maybe come work with a higher level of player, or they're on their journey like I was 10, 12 years ago, where they might want to go and get a career out of it and so forth. So I've got to understand what they want out of the process at the moment, because I have to be really careful with it, because I've mentioned this to him. I can demand this and ask for this and ask for this, but the volunteers at the end of the day, I can't. I've got to be careful with my expectations in terms of it, but at the same time, we've got to try and get things right. So that's probably a real challenge for me in terms of how much I can push it with them in terms of expectations. But again, I'm extremely lucky. I've got an amazing group of coaches there, and again, we talk about good, but they are amazing people. So at the moment, we're doing things around. So they send the session plans in advance, so we can go through session plans together. Not just me again; it'll be the other coaches, as part of that squad. We'll all go through it together and have a look through it. I'll get involved on the pitch. If I see something, I'll step in with the coach and say, look, maybe consider this and so forth. Or I'll actually just jump in the actual session and go, do you want me to do this and show you how to do that? And again, they're open to it. And then also with putting mechanisms in place, not just to help the coaches, but to help the players. So we've put a curriculum in place in terms of what they're actually going to learn over the season. So there's a bit of structure in terms of making sure it's a long-term development process rather than an ad hoc reaction process. Maybe what happened in the game, right, we need to go and work on that. That's all been scrapped. So we've got a clear curriculum in place. We've got obviously these values and beliefs of what a session should look like in terms of a Chester session. So in terms of, we do lots of opposed stuff, we do a lot of directional stuff and things like that. So all that's in place. So it's mainly supporting the coaches and helping them in terms of their journey as a coach, but then the knock-on effect, it helps the players as well.
What does success look like at Chester? So you mentioned you like developing people, but there's also development of players. What would success look like at the club? So
before I went in there, I've got a really good history of getting youth players into the first team. But when they looked at it, and obviously before I went in there, a lot of those youth players came in at a later age. So maybe like an under 15, under 16, when they were probably getting released by your likes of your Liverpools and your Evertons around that area, or your Tranmeres and so forth. So they entered the system late in terms of Chester. Again, last season they had 2 or 3 youth team players make first team debuts. But again, their history maybe at the club wasn't that long in terms of how long they've been there. So success now is to get someone who's started there as an under 10 and get them into the first team. That's what success will look like. But I've done it, like I said, I've done that coach's handbook. We've done a player handbook. We've done a parent handbook as well. And we talk about it. What is key though is, and in terms of this be the real success is whenever they enter the system, and whenever they finish the system, that time period has got to be an enjoyable one for them. So they may only come to us for a year, or they may come to us for 6 years, but at the end of it, they've got to look back on it as a player and think, I really enjoyed that. That was one of my best times as a footballer, was when I was at Chester. That's the key bit. That's what real success will be for me. Because I think if you can achieve that and do that, the rest of it sort of comes along. You'll get success on the pitch in terms of creating players and so forth. If they come into training and they're enjoying it and they're getting better, it just works hand in hand, doesn't it? So that's the real one.
It's interesting because on that perspective, we see success as more as a feeling rather than a metric.
Yeah.
And sometimes a lot of people within football look at the metrics and the numbers coming through. But it's nice to know that you see the emotional and welfare side of developing people.
Yeah.
Would you say that's something that's part of who you are in terms of your identity and your philosophy around coaching, and you feel like that's been implemented during your current spell now?
Yeah, I think the main thing with me is that when I look back on my coaching and like I say, my values and my beliefs, because of where I've worked at in terms of age groups and so forth, I've always worked with younger players and so forth. So I think the oldest group I've ever worked with is an under 16s. I've never gone in to the adult game and so forth. And one of my key messages to myself and in my book and to the coaches is the kids. And you've just got to remember the children. That is just the biggest thing for me. So when they're there, you've got to treat them like kids. and make sure that obviously everything that we do is based around the fact that they are kids. And the reason they're there is they're not there to get a career out of football. They might say it and they might want to do it, but the real reason there is they like playing football. They're there to have fun. They're there to come and see the mates and have a kick about the mates. That's what they're really there for, and to play the game that they really love. So we've got to remember that, because what are we doing if we don't remember that? If we're not there to support them and make that environment a fun, excitable environment for them, what are we actually doing? There's just no compromise around that or any argument around that. I think that's massive. I think the key fact is just they're there. They're going to behave like kids. Remember that. So be patient with them and expect some sort of bad behaviour every now and then, because that's what kids do. But at the same time, you've got to make sure. So when you're designing your practices, would you want to go and would you have fun in that practice? Would you enjoy being in that practice? Yeah, absolutely. I get game day, every single age group we deal with, we put as close as we can. It's just equal game time. It's the same amount of game time. We're not there to win games and keep players on for more than other ones. They haven't turned up to watch from the sidelines. They've turned up on a match day because they want to play a game of football. So they'll all get the same amount of game time. It's absolutely key.
So we'll move on to your book then. So The Intelligent Soccer Coach, which is available online, I presume.
Yeah, that came out last year. Yeah.
So describe the process behind the book.
Yeah, so it's something I've always wanted to do. It's one of those things where just as an achievement to say that I've managed to do it, and I was quite keen on as well, though, not doing it as a self-publisher. I wanted to actually get it published, if that makes sense, because again, I think I just wanted it for someone else to say, yes, that's a good idea, and yes, the content's good. So I was quite keen to get somebody else on board in terms of a publisher. So the thought process behind it, the first one was just because all that FA education I was doing, I was working at university, giving supporting students and so forth, and I just felt like some of the information I was giving out was well received and people were finding it really helpful. But then I'd go and see them a year later or 6 months, you bump into them and they've probably forgotten everything that we've spoken about, which is understandable again, because you go on these courses and so forth, and then it's a bit like we always say about your driving test, and you do certain ways on your driving test, and then once you're out on the road and you've passed, you go back to your old habits, don't you? So I just felt I've got information that was well received, that people liked, but they just needed reminders about. So I thought probably the best way is I was either going to go website or book, and I just thought the book would probably be a little bit more of a challenge for me, which I fancied doing, and it'd be a little bit more, that's something that I've always done and it'll always be there, do you know what I mean? And so it's something that I can always look back on. So had an idea in terms of what I wanted to do. I thought I'd go down of actually writing a couple of chapters first of all, just to make sure I could actually do it, whether I could actually write or not. And then hopefully it would give publishers a bit of a flavour of what it looked like and how it would what the finished product would look like and how it would read and so forth. So I did a couple of chapters and then sent it off to, I think it was about 4 or 5 publishers. I think the first 3 or 4 came back and just said no, and I was literally down to my last one, and I was lucky enough. It is one of those things again where they said, we're actually just looking for something like this, in terms of we were looking for that sort of book in terms of coaching, and they call it soccer because a lot of the markets in America, so they wanted some soccer sort of coaching book that was sort of aimed at sort of grassroots sort of level. So it was just that right moment at right time. So yeah, and from there, so just went ahead and carried on and did it. Had a tight deadline to get the rest of it finished, and about a 6-month deadline to get most of it written, which I just about achieved. And then yeah, came out September last year. So
people listening to this might be from different background, and they might be in different industry where obviously we're looking at this from a footballing lens, but they might want to maybe write a book in a different field.
Yep.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to maybe design a book such as yours?
Again, as with most things, most of it comes from planning, the bits you don't see actually in the book. So you need to have a clear idea of what it is, what message it is, and what it is the reader will get from the book, and how you're going to get that across to them. So in terms of chapter content, how the book will flow in terms of one chapter to the next, and the journey and the connections between them is really key. And just making sure as well there's probably nothing else similar out there in terms of it's got to be a little bit different to get the readers involved. So I think that's the key bit. And then just research around the content. So again, I like to think I had a good amount of knowledge already, but I didn't have enough knowledge to go and feel like I could write a book that I'd be happy with and be happy for people to go and spend money on. Do you know what I mean? So I had to go and do some more research again, speaking to coaches, looking at other books, websites, etc. So get all that done. And then, like I say, the best thing for me was just to have actually go at it just try writing a chapter and just see whether you can actually do it or not. And then I've spoken before, probably the next hardest bit then is just actually being happy with it. Because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, you write a chapter and then you read it back and you think, oh, no, I need to do this and I need to do that and I need to change this and I should have included that. And you could take years doing it. You've got to, at some stage, you do need to give yourself deadlines saying, right, I've got to get this chapter finished by this date. And then whatever it is, and that's it. Put it to one side and start the next chapter. Because if not, like I say, you could be spending years on it, and you probably end up with the same product you could have done in 2 months.
So did you have a writing routine?
No, I think you're fine. Again, I might be different, but I think most people, you've got to be in the zone. So I find like you can sit down.
So it's deep work.
Yeah, I can sit down and think my mind's just not working. You're better off just shelving it and going, I can sit here for 2 hours, wasting it. I might as well go do something else and take my mind off it and revisit it the next day. But then it's like I say to students as well when they're doing like research and dissertations and stuff like that, also accept that you might have an hour where you don't do a lot. You might only write 2 sentences, but that hour's still an hour well spent. You needed that hour to get onto the next stage. So don't get disappointed with it either in terms of if you're not that productive within a set period of time. But at the same time, also just recognise if this is just a waste of time, your head's gone, and go away with it. I even had to like leave. I didn't do the chapters necessarily in order. So if I did like chapter 3 and I'm thinking I know what I want for chapter 4, but I can't express it the way I want it, I put chapter 4 and started chapter 5 maybe, then light bulb moment, straight back to chapter 4, and I had to freeze chapter 5 because it was in my head then. So I had to go and get the laptop and start writing and so forth. So it's one of those things, again, it's what works for you, but you just got to be realistic with it and be acceptable of it, but you're not going to sit down for 2-3 hours a day and bash off a chapter each day. It doesn't work like that.
People might get overwhelmed by the process of writing a book, do you know?
I understand, yeah, 100% I can see that. To be honest, because I wasn't really sure, it was just something I thought I'd try. I think it was that first chapter was just massive for me. If I can write this chapter here, and I didn't put any word count on it, I didn't put anything on it, I just thought, I turned the word count off and I didn't look at how many pages I wrote or anything like that. I just wrote and I just thought I'd see how it went, and then I didn't ever read it back or anything. I just wrote and just carried on writing, and then I finished it, and then you sort of go, right, let's actually have a reflect now back on it and see what it actually looks like. And then the next minute it's 5,000-8,000 words for a chapter, and it's so many pages, and you read it back and you think, do you know what, that's all right. It's not half bad in terms of the way it reads. There's mistakes left, right and centre obviously within it and so forth, and you change it and you're thinking, or now you've read it back, I might just put that section there and move it round. But I think that was the one for me, just not thinking I'm definitely going to do it, but just thinking I'll have a go and see if I can do it, because if it had come back and I thought that's a pile of rubbish, that would have been the end of the process right there. I'd have just stopped it and gone, I'll go try something else. So I think for me, that's how it worked, and that's what I needed. So is that, chapter 1 was huge.
On the book, what's the biggest takeaway from it if people want to buy your product?
I'd say there's three main elements to it that I'd like to think people get from it, and it all goes around understanding. So it's about understanding yourself as a person and as a coach, and what you do as a coach. It's understanding the game of football, and it's understanding the players. So the first thing I talk about is understanding yourself and what you bring. So we spoke about earlier about transferable skills and what you bring into it, and what is your actual purpose of actually coaching. So we talk about in the book just tiny little things like most people enter football coaching because either they want a career out of it or like I did, just to go and help the kids. So I talk about just have a little mental note and write it on a bit of paper or something and just stick it somewhere and just remember why you're actually doing it, because it can get so pressured at times, or we sort of get these outside influences and so forth. We forget why we're actually there. So I think that's really key, and just those little snippets and reminders, why am I actually doing this? And it's because you enjoy it, and it's because you want the kids to enjoy it. So things like that, and then just a key bit around just understanding what your job is as a coach and what your responsibilities are in terms of planning, in terms of what you actually do when the sessions are up and going, in terms of interventions and so forth. So that's a small part of it. The main bit then is as mad as it sounds, is just understanding the game of football. And I know we all say, I know what football is and what it is and so forth, but breaking it down and thinking about what is the actual game of football. So we talk about it being in the invasion game, like your netballs and your hockeys and your rugbies. And then we talk about what key elements are in football that you then probably need to replicate within your sessions. So I talked about before about direction. Direction is a key element of football. You're trying to invade the opposition's territory and get the ball up that way rather than that way. So that should really happen in most of your practices, if that's a key element. And then we also talk about the before and after of stuff. So in terms of if we're working on passing, always remember what happens just before a pass and what happens after a pass, so you can incorporate that within your practices as well. So in terms of, so I'll use a dribbling one, as it's probably the best example I can think of, is if we do a basic 1v1 dribbling, usually the defender plays the pass into the attacker directly in front of him, and then he tries or she tries to dribble, gets past the defender and then stops the ball on the line, and that's a basic dribbling practice. So we talk about whenever in a game of football does a defender deliberately pass to an attacker, and in that direction where it's a 90-degree straight on pass, it never happens, or 1% of a game it happens. What does it usually look like? And a pass will probably usually come from behind them or from the side or something like that from a teammate. So let's put that into the practice. And what does a player usually do after they dribble past someone in a game of football? I've never seen a player stop a ball on a line before after they dribble past the defender. So why are we getting them to do that? They'll pass it, or they'll shoot, or whatever it is, to put on something else after. So once you got past the defender, you might just do a small pass into a gate, or there might be a goal for you to shoot at. So think about the before and after actions. So there's loads of stuff around that. And then there's also that bit, again, the players. So there's a lot of remember the children. Be prepared for them to act like children. Talking about individual stuff. So can we treat them as individuals, not as a group of players, and support them as individuals? So there's loads of stuff around that. And then the key bit for me is I've talked about all this, and I've then used practices as examples. So rather than just going, here's a load of practices, which is probably my second book, but I'll talk about after, here's a load of practices, this is the reason why this is a practice. So don't just say, here's a practice, go and do it. Here's a practice, think about it, this is why you're doing it, and how you may need to tailor it for your players, again, because you can't just pick up a practice off somewhere and go and do it your own group of players. Again, most people obviously will be aware of that. You need to adapt it and change it, and again, there's a chapter in it about how you can change the practice to meet the needs of your players and that. So it's something, and I'm getting reviews back at the moment, it was the key bit for me was people saying they're going to keep referring back to it. So I don't want it just someone to read it, I mean, it goes on a bookshelf. They can start the season with it. October time, I'm struggling with this, I'll go back and get Carl's book and read that chapter again. Yeah, that's what I need to do. That's what I want it to be. I want to be a resource they can come back to.
Would you say the key areas within the book is attention to detail and realism in terms of what you just mentioned? I think that dribbling epitomises those two areas.
The realism's a really good point. I think, yeah, absolutely. Again, it's one of those key messages to go for out of it. Again, if you don't do it in a game of football, why do it in training? So again, why are you dribbling around cones? It's not going to happen. There's got to be certain elements, because if not, you just be playing a game of football constantly in training. So you can't just do it completely to that. But you've got to get to as close to it as the game of football as you possibly can. So I think that's absolutely key. And then in terms of the other key message and that detail, people don't see the detail usually. They just see the practice, but you've got to realise all the detail goes in the planning side. And so the other key message I forgot to mention before is just giving players freedom. There's none of this, you go there, you pass to there, then you pass to there, then you run there. There's got to be free, because again, the kids, they don't want to be running from cone to cone where they're told to. What happens at playtime at a school, you let them out on the playground, and what do? They just run everywhere, don't they? They go random, they're all over the place. And that needs to happen in the football. They don't turn up to a football practice and then be told they have to go from A to B to C to D. They want an area, they want to be able to run around it, and they want to be able to go and experiment and try stuff and be creative, and that's really key.
So the first book got complete, and then the second book come about. So
yep.
Talk to me about the next book.
Yeah, so it's due out next month.
Okay. Where can we find the two books? Where can we find them?
Any bookstore really. So if you just Google them, most people will go for Amazon, but Waterstones, WH Smith, all that type of stuff. Yeah, so it's readily available. So yeah, I got to be honest, I got the bug after the first. I was really happy with the end product. I've getting some really good reviews on it in terms of feedback and so forth, and I thought, you know, I've done something that people like. So I thought I had another idea for a second one. So I spoke to the publisher and they were like, yeah, 100%, go for it. So I had again, tight turnaround, but just managed to get it done in time. So that, like I say, it's due out next month. So this one's a little bit different. This is more just about practice design. So this one's going down. I think as coaches, we always think we have to produce something different week in, week out. We can never use the same practices. We've always got to be something creative and so forth. And I've gone away from that, and I've sort of said, you don't need to keep doing that. Put them in an environment we know, and they'll actually get better in a similar environment rather than creating new environments each week. So the idea came, so I spoke to other coaches, and especially within the professional game, they have favourite practices that they go to. And it's just about adapting them to get different outcomes out of it. So basically what I've done is I've produced 10 practices, and then each practice can be changed or adapted 9 different ways. So therefore your 10 core practices go to 100 practices. So the concept is you name a practice after a player or something. So I don't know, we're going to go through the Ronaldo practice. So all the players know what the Ronaldo practice is, they're off doing it. And then I might just introduce some gates in it, or I might introduce direction in it, or I might introduce a set of goals in it, whatever it may be, and then we just change it, go, right, you're doing your Ronaldo practice, but after you've done your bit in your Ronaldo practice, you then have to go and try and score a goal, or whatever it may be. It's a little bit more detailed than that, obviously. And then all of a sudden, the practice focuses on shooting, because there's goals in it. Then the week after, we do Ronaldo practice again, but we've introduced some passing gates within it. So after you've done it, you have to complete 2 passes through the passing gates. So your focus then is gone from shooting the previous week but to passing. So the reason being is that the players aren't spending the first 5-10 minutes of a session trying to work out what the actual practice is, and the coach is trying to explain it to them. They know it, they just turn up, they get told which practice they're in, they run in, they get playing. So you're maximising your playing time. The players obviously enjoy the practices, they're all fun-based practices, and it's just dead simplistic for the coaches then in terms of the planning. They know they've got a core of practices that you can use throughout the season. And I think there's something like 16 different topics that we cover in terms of dribbling, shooting, passing, one-on-one defending, counter-pressing, that type of stuff that each of these practices can be used for. So again, I'm hoping it's a useful resource that coaches can just go back to. So
when's the date for that, when that comes out?
I think at the moment they're looking at something like the 1st or 2nd week of August that'll be out, but you can pre-order it now. So
what we'll do, we'll put the links in the description, so if anyone's watching, they can look at that.
Yeah.
Final question, Carl.
Yep.
So if you could go back to the start of your coaching journey, and if you could give yourself one bit of advice, what would that be?
I think it may be do it earlier, so because I absolutely love it. And I say to him, it's funny, my lad's coach, he does coaching, he's 25 years of age, 25 in October. And I said he should be a miles better coach than me by the end of it, because he's got 10 years on me. He's been doing it since he's 18. So the first bit will be definitely to start it earlier. The next bit, I would say, I think I would say to all coaches, I probably didn't go and experience enough. So even though I tried to coach as much as I can, I just sort of stayed at one place and put a lot of time in that one place. So like I say, my first grassroots clubs, I just stayed with the under-8s and so forth, and then under-9s. And then I went and put loads of hours in at Crewe and so forth. I probably needed to go in different places and experience different ways and work with different players and different age groups and so forth, and just really just get as much experience as I possibly could on the pitch. I needed that time on the pitch more. I think that slowed me down in terms of me coaching, and I think it's also impacted me a little bit in terms of me coaching. In terms of, I don't look at other perspectives sometimes in terms of how it could be done differently. I'm probably a little bit too focused in how I like to do stuff, just because I've not experienced other ways in which you can do it, if that makes sense. Because there's no one definite right way in which you can do it. And like I say, every time I go and watch someone here, for example, or go when I was at Man City and watch somebody else, there's always something I picked up from another coach. And like, there might be some of it, I don't know, say 8% that I may have known or would disagree with, but if I picked up 2% or something that I thought, well, that's good, I can introduce that, then I think it's definitely worth it. So yeah, go out and experience as much as you possibly can. That's what I'd say.
Carl, thank you so much.
Mate, thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Cheers.
Boom.